A very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining our Homeopathy 24/7 podcast. We are going to be speaking to an array of international guests who will share their knowledge and experiences of homeopathy with you. We will discuss all types of subjects such as remedies, symptoms, and stories of health. No matter where you are with your homeopathic journey, we aim to inspire you on your quest to natural health and living. The podcast is brought to you by Greensmith, the founder of Homeopathy 24/7, which is a global platform connecting you with a homeopath wherever you are in the world, 24 hours a day. So let's get started with today's chat. Please welcome Mary Greensmith.
Hello, nice to see you all. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome Charlie Ellis-James. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's lovely. I just love this opportunity to be able to talk to homeopaths because, of course, we love talking about homeopathy. So first of all, let me ask you, why are you a homeopath?
Maybe part of the answer is I love talking about homeopathy. You've just given part of the answer, indeed. It's my dream to be a homeopath. I mean, it's taken me a while to get to the point where this can be my full-time job. And I suddenly realized the other day, a friend of mine asked me, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And, you know, for the first time in my life, I was just like, I want to be as best a homeopath as I possibly can be. And never really been able to answer that in any other job or any other situation. So, you know, that kind of shows how much I love it, I guess. But why am I a homeopath? It's the most privileged job, I think it is, to be able to sit with people in a time of need, whether that is a small discomfort, a massive loss, a huge change in their life, you know, very unwell family member, whatever it is, and actually help facilitate them through that journey, whatever that looks like to them, through a gentle means, through a healing means, and through a way that just helps them get to their next step, because it is their next step. It's not our step, it's not the medicine step, it's their step, but just help them possibly when they're just a little bit stuck or struggling to get to that bit. And yeah, I just think we're so lucky to have this incredible medicine, this incredible means to help people. So why would I not be a homeopath, really, is my question. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, once you start learning about it, it's just so addictive, isn't it? Because I think that's part of it as well, is that you never stop learning.
No, you don't at all. I remember when I first started studying, so gosh, it was about 15 years ago or something now, and my first course that I did, and I bought all these books. I bought all the books on the book list, and I was just like, goodness, this is a lot of books. And you know, I keep going back to them, and obviously, you know, my bookshelf has grown and grown, and we love homeopathy books, and it's just, you know, everything goes online and lectures and mentoring, etc. But you know, just having the opportunity to keep learning is just, yeah, it's incredible. And like you say, completely addictive. There's no question about that.
And Charlie, you specialise and have a special interest in pregnancy and childbirth. Why?
Just because it's homeopathy is useful at any point in your life. There's no question about that. I mean, there isn't a time where I could possibly think of that homeopathy would not be useful in some way. But there are times which it's incredibly useful. And I think that pregnancy for me is just one of those times, and childbirth and the postpartum era when everything is still so dynamic. And I realized it was actually in my pregnancy that I realized how awesome homeopathy is during this time. I was already practicing, already qualified, and you know, generally I'm pretty fortunate. I've been using homeopathy for many years, so maybe it's not fortune, but you know, I don't have to treat myself that much. I've got a homeopath for the needs that I have, but acute stuff I don't get that much. So that's not really been a feature of me, I guess. And then when I became pregnant, I suddenly realized that all of these things were happening to my body, and I really loved my pregnancy. I was actually very surprised how much I loved my pregnancy, but I adored my pregnancy. And when these sort of discomforts, really, because you know, I was fortunate in my pregnancy, and came up, just having the means to be able to treat them quickly, with no toxic side effects, knowing that I was healing myself and doing no harm, and if anything, really probably quite a lot of good for the baby that I was growing inside me, just gave me a real feeling of control, and I control over my health. And I think that that's a big feature that we talk about these days with pregnancy, outside of homeopathy, outside of healthcare, is, you know, people just feeling in control of their health and educated to make their own health decisions. And I'm a really strong believer in that. And homeopathy helped allow that for me. And I'm a homeopath, so I thought, brilliant, I can help as many other women as I possibly can, and their partners and their babies, whatever else, to feel in control and not feel rubbish. I think, you know, I've got friends who, you know, they are on their second, third, fourth pregnancy, and they just go, oh, I'm in for it now. You know, I always have terrible pregnancies. And there's kind of this feeling amongst people that don't use homeopathy that, you know, if you have a rubbish pregnancy, you can't do anything about it. But it's not true. So really being able to get yourself as healthy as possible. And the other side of that is, if you're new to homeopathy and you start using it in your pregnancy, what people end up doing is using it for the rest of their lives, for their children and for themselves. So it can be a real game changer, if you go to a homeopath or you treat yourself, or preferably both, really, during that time.
And of course, people always ask the question, how safe is homeopathy during pregnancy?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. And I think, you know, question everything is kind of my ethos. There's no question. But it's totally safe during pregnancy. There's no question at all. Homeopathic medicines are energetic medicines, and they work with the healing of the body. So they really either do nothing or they help. I mean, there are other situations if you were to take really high potencies very often, for example, but we never would ever say that is a good idea, whether you were pregnant or not. So as long as you follow the guidelines of self-prescribing and you use a bit of common sense, you get some advice. If you're worried at all, talk to a homeopath. We have a great Facebook group. It's called Homeopathy for Pregnancy and Beyond. Run by myself and another handful of absolutely lovely homeopaths. So come on, ask us if you've got a question. So do ask if you're concerned, but actually it's the safest medicine that I know of to use during pregnancy. There's no question.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so lovely about homeopathy, isn't it? Because it is safe as long as you follow the guidelines. It is easy to take, which of course a lot of herbal remedies aren't, and therefore it's easy for newborn babies as well, if they need it. And you know, we are here to help people learn about homeopathy and about how it can be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't used it much before, it can feel a bit like, possibly a bit like a new language or a new situation. And it kind of is, I guess, in some ways. But like anything, as long as you start slow, you know, start with what you know, ask for advice. You know, they're probably some of the most important things when you start anything new. Then, you know, you're not going to go wrong. And yeah, like you say, for newborn babies, you know, it's quite, I mean, who would be a baby? It can be really tough being a baby. You know, I've got a teething baby at the moment, and goodness me, who would be a baby? Like, I don't know. But homeopathy is so helpful for that. There's no question at all. And you look at all the specific symptoms. So we're not looking at, for example, teething. We're not saying, you know, here's a teething remedy, which, you know, can be thrown about a bit. And I think it's really important not to do that. You know, we've got to stick to, like you said, Mary, those guidelines. We look at specific symptoms. We always talk about the individual, and then you're on the right track. And it can just like, if babies are getting homeopathy from when they're first born or even before they're born, you know, they're on a really good health track, really.
So tell us a little bit about some of the people that you help. What sort of things can homeopathy help with pregnancy, for pregnant women?
So what I often find with the women in my clinic is the breadth of what homeopathy can help with is often quite surprising for people. And you know, we all tend to go to a homeopath because of a complaint or a couple of top complaints, and they're what you would start talking about. But as we go through the consultations, because the consultations are long, we have the gift of time. It's important that we get to know you in those consultations and your symptoms and what you're experiencing. Other things come up. You know, we all have stuff, don't we? So that stuff starts to be discussed. And there was one particular lady who I treated a little bit over a year ago now. She's got her baby is probably about 4 months-ish, and I'm treating her baby now and herself still, and another one of her children actually, so I know the family quite well. And she came to see me when she was about halfway through her pregnancy, and it's her 4th pregnancy, so you know she knows what she's doing, and the main reason she came to me was really high levels of anxiety. So she was incredibly anxious, incredibly tearful. And what was quite interesting to me was how anxious she was about the rest of her pregnancy and her labour, which is completely understandable. There's no question at all. But it was her 4th pregnancy. So that's possibly an interesting area, because the rest of her pregnancies and labours had been, you know, really very uncomplicated. So this was the main reason that she came. She was experiencing a lot of heart palpitations, and she so kind of burning pains around that. Terrible insomnia. She has 3 children, so the moment that she was woken up by somebody, she was not able to get back to sleep. Not helped by these worries, of course. But the reason I thought about this when you said is because she also was experiencing pelvic girdle pain, so pain around her pelvis, which during pregnancy, the release of the hormone relaxin, which helps. The theory is that it helps your pelvic bones relax and eventually help you birth your baby. And some people experience mild up to really quite excruciating pains from this. But that wasn't something she was expecting to get help from homeopathy with, because she'd been to see an osteopath, and her osteopath said, well, you know, this is probably only going to get worse, but we'll see what we can do. And so she came to see me, and we had long conversations about everything that we've spoken about. And I gave her the remedy Arsenicum. And when I saw her, well, I had an update from her about 10 days later. I remember the first line was, the heartburn was the first thing to go. It was absolutely amazing. Okay. And then this went on to list her symptoms, which was, you know, she wasn't feeling this level of anxiety. She suddenly just was so much more grounded. She was very tearful before, very tearful in the consultation as well. That had just, you know, got an awful lot better. And all of this, that she was sleeping so much better, and her pelvic girdle pain was better. And she was like, I can't believe that's possible, really, you know. So actually, there are so many areas that homeopathy can touch, and still, as a homeopath, I'm amazed sometimes. I'm like, wow, it helped that too. That's awesome, you know. So yeah, those kind of situations.
It is amazing, isn't it, when we give a remedy and it helps all of the symptoms that they had forgotten to tell us about as well. And you think, oh, yes, that hit the mark. So tell us, why did you choose Arsenicum album?
So Arsenicum is a strong anxiety remedy. There's no question at all. But what's really important to remember is not to fall into the trap of going, right, there's anxiety and therefore we give X remedy. For example, Arsenicum. I haven't got my repertoire open, but I could imagine there's at least 250 remedies under the word anxiety, and our repertoire is the kind of index that guides us into what remedies are available for different symptoms. Awesome books. So there is a level of anxiety there. There's no question. So that's that. Anxiety around health is a big one. Anxiety around the health of others is also a really strong one. She wasn't only worried about herself, but her children. We're all worried about our children, but to a high level, which she even called irrational later. And then the other aspects that really pointed at anxiety at Arsenicum was, we think of Arsenicum as kind of a burning remedy, like burning pain. So the heartburn was debilitatingly burning. There's no question about that. There's a level of insomnia in there too. And there was just all of these different, and some of the smaller symptoms as well, that just everything has to match. Okay, so you've got these big ones, you've got the headlines, you've got the anxiety about health, but actually when you get the smaller ones that all fit into place underneath, and that's the work that we do often after that we see you, also during the consultation, to make sure that everything fits. And that's when homeopathy is that beautiful. So yeah, I mean, it's coming back to the conversation about self-prescribing. That's really important, that we don't just go, right, this for this, Arsenicum for anxiety, chamomilla for teething. You really have to go into the details, because otherwise it's not going to work. And, we want it to work because you want to feel better, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the time and the effort of collecting all of the symptoms and then translating them into the repertory. And then from I think it's actually over 500 remedies for anxiety. So then actually choosing which one fits into all of the symptoms that you've collected to find the right remedy. And of course, as you say, Arsenicum fits so many of those aspects that you thought about. So it's important to say here that Arsenicum might or might not be the right remedy for somebody else if you've mentioned one of those symptoms. But when we collect up the symptoms, we're choosing the remedy that fits most of those symptoms. So that's a really good story. So even after, was it 10 days, she came back to you and she was flabbergasted at the amount of improvement that she felt.
Yeah, flabbergasted, great word for it, underused word. Yeah, absolutely. And just, I think just grateful to homeopathy. That's the part of it, isn't it? That just like, oh, thank goodness I don't have to wait another 4 or 5 months for this to pass. And yeah, just to have that. I mean, she said that by the time when she took the first dose, she was feeling better. And it's also important to know that everything didn't disappear. So when she came and we spoke again 4 weeks later, the heartburn had started to creep back a little bit in. She was still massively improved, don't get me wrong. And what the biggest part that I felt, just because the time before was the first time we'd properly spoken. We'd had an introductory call before that, but this was the first proper consultation, was just this level of groundedness. She was just so much more grounded. And then we went and we looked at the other stuff going on. And once the big stuff has gone, once we are comfortable, because when you're in that level of anxiety or that level of heartburn, you're so uncomfortable that actually it's difficult to really comprehend everything else that's happening. Then in the next kind of times, you can talk about, okay, so this little bit of heartburn's left, and actually I've had these thoughts about this, and you can give sometimes stronger, wiser, deeper conversations about other parts of your life, I think is what I find through homeopathic consultations. And as we get to know each other between a practitioner and a patient as well, that's really important. So it's an ongoing situation. I was told by my first homeopath, homeopathy is best thought of as a course of treatment rather than and these miracle fixes are amazing, but we don't expect them, put it that way. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right that we often see, don't we, after a consultation and a remedy, our clients come back and they have sort of peeled off the outer layer, that's gone, what they originally came for, and now they are able to see more deeply into other things that might be affecting them. But what came across from what you were just talking about was the fact that we were looking at both emotional symptoms and physical symptoms, and both of these were helped with one remedy.
Oh, absolutely. And I sort of forget now, because it's so normal to me, that of course everything is linked, and the fact that emotional symptoms, mental symptoms, physical symptoms, everything is there isn't a divide between them at all. It's just these are the categories that we put them in to discuss it within our language that we have. And I forget really that if you're new to homeopathy, if you haven't used it, you know, we think about taking a paracetamol for a headache in mainstream medicine. So you think about taking antidepressants for an emotional problem. But actually, in homeopathy, we look at the whole being together. And, you know, talk to a lady about her periods, and she'll tell you pretty quickly, a lot of them, that emotional and physical symptoms are very linked. You know, in essence, the period, the menstrual cycle, is a physical activity. It's hormone based. There is a physical change in your body, but most women that I know and would talk to and come into my clinic would say about the emotional changes that you feel around your period, around your menstrual cycle. So that's just one example of how completely linked that is. And we could go through everything. I could go probably through every symptom I can think of and tell you an emotional aspect around it. So yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's not seeing individual symptoms as I've got a headache and I feel a bit sick and I whatever. It's all of that together. And actually, after a while, you start to see links between them. So you're like, oh, I've got a headache and I feel a bit nauseous, but both of them feel a bit better when I go outside. You know, these are the kind of what we call generalities, and which is really useful in terms of homeopathy, is actually that those modalities that change what changes the symptoms. So you never stop learning about yourself as well, which is such a beautiful thing, I think. So yeah, absolutely, everything linked, everything that you could possibly think of. And also those things that you go, this sounds really silly, but, you know, often as homeopaths, they're the ones that get us writing with our pens, because what's silly, what's peculiar, what's interesting, what stands out is often some of the most important things for us to think about, actually.
Yes, it's like a gift to a homeopath, isn't it, when somebody says that? This may sound strange, but
yeah. Well, that last thing is you're walking out the door and you go, oh, actually, there's one more. You're like, right, thank you very much indeed. Yes, absolutely. So don't hold back on those things with your homeopath, because they'll be happy once you tell them it, definitely. Yeah.
Yes, it makes our life easier, doesn't it? Give us another case. Tell us a little bit more about another client you've helped.
So another lady earlier on in her pregnancy, she came to see me, and she had quite a long history of suffering with concerning thoughts. Okay, so thoughts that, so it's different in terms of, it's not anxiety, it's not a sort of raised heart rate, that kind of situation. It's just a thought will run and go in a concerning, worrying direction. So that's something that plagued her for quite a long time. She can't get out of her head. You know, it'd be, you know, her daughter having an injury or dying in a car crash, for example, you know, things like that. And they would run, but that during her pregnancy, this was starting to come back a lot, and you know, really very difficult for her to deal with. Massive levels of exhaustion. So the exhaustion really is what brought her into my virtual office. Through my online clinic, she said that she'd get to a point of the day and she'd just feel like her legs had fallen off. Basically, she was just absolutely done for. Interesting symptom was incredibly heavy head. So she described her head as feeling like a bowling ball, like she just couldn't hold it up on her shoulders. She'd suffered with migraines previously, but again, during her pregnancy, these were getting worse. She found herself incredibly irritable, well, compared to how she normally would be. And there was a real dryness about, and she was able to really, and still is, I'm still treating her now, again, postpartum, she is very able to see the objectivity of her symptoms, which we get better at over time. But this was her first time homeopathy, so that was really useful. And she could link the fact that she was having dry eyes, dry mouth, you know, her skin was dry, everything was feeling quite dry. And also what she was finding cravings, so we talk about cravings a lot, and in pregnancy, really, really useful cravings and aversions. And she was craving salt a lot. Salt wasn't something that she has a lot in her diet, and she was having big cravings here. So the exhaustion brought her in to my clinic, and then all of those other things we discussed as we went through. And some of you might have already gone, if you know a bit about homeopathy, salt, again, it makes us think about things, dryness. And I gave her Natrum Muriaticum, which is, they're all incredible remedies, but a really incredible remedy. And very much hit, although within the consultation, she discussed these worrying thoughts very much, probably because it's the first time we properly met. And, we have to build up trust within a relationship. Just because we're homeopaths, we don't suddenly, expect the whole world to trust us. But it's a big symptom, and it's an important aspect of what she was talking about, even though she didn't talk about it that much. And all of these areas, again, were really, really helped by even that first prescription. So again, update, a significant improvement. And then by the time I saw her 4 weeks later, again, she said, she described it as when we first spoke, she wasn't really able to engage in life at that point because she was just so fatigued, so exhausted. And following the remedy, and as the month progressed, she just slowly but surely was able to engage again, access life. And that so around Natrum is salt in its crudest form. Again, a salt craving doesn't mean you need Natrum at all. Everything else has to fit. The dryness, the migraines, the sort of feeling of sort of impending doom, really, in some ways, this kind of like really quite deep depression, this sort of hopelessness, I guess, is one way of talking about it. The way she described that was very linked to the symptoms in our books. And it has a symptom that your head is, the sensation that your head is incredibly heavy. So just like we were saying before, all of that stuff has to fit. And we've been working since on a lot of her emotional symptoms, which she's also a therapist, and deals with a lot of trauma through that. And so, it's an ongoing situation, emotionally, most definitely, but homeopathy has helped her so much, physically and emotionally. And to have that ongoing support, I think, is really, really useful. So yeah, another great case of homeopathy in pregnancy.
Fantastic story, and fantastic just going through the methodology, really, of how we come to one remedy, because of course this is quite different than when we're first aid prescribing, and there might be tempted to give this remedy for this and this remedy for this, and it's just a beautiful example of how homeopathy works when we can get a whole story, when we can get a lot more information.
Yeah, and in many ways first aid prescribing is just a distilled version of this bigger situation. And when we say, kind of, if you've got a cold, what is your snotty nose like? What is your headache like? What is your thirst like? So you're not necessarily going into all your fears and phobias and dreams and aversions, but you're taking a handful of those top symptoms. And if you can get those to match on a remedy, then for first aid prescribing, you're really getting there. And the consultation that we do is just an extrapolation of that. Really, it's a bigger version of that. And as a result, it can have bigger and deeper effects. Is effectively what it comes down to. So it's all the same thing. It's just the different levels of it, isn't there, really? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Charlie, you've written a book. You've got an ebook.
Yes.
Pregnancy. We can put a link, obviously, below our audio. Tell us a little bit about the pregnancy and the book, and who should be downloading it.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you. I almost forgot then. So yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Yes, so I've written an ebook, and I'm hoping that it's accessible to everybody. So if you are pregnant, if you are hoping to become pregnant, if you work in an area that actually having these kind of skills would also be useful to you, that could be another element that this works. And what I've done is try to make it accessible to, if you've never used homeopathy before, then my aim is that you can pick up this book and you can virtually read it or print it if you want, and be able to use it. Or if you are quite used to self-prescribing, it will give you lots of details as well. So I have gone through exactly how to choose a remedy, what to do, after you've chosen it, etc. But the real core of the book, I guess, is I've taken 15 top common complaints within pregnancy that I see in my clinic most, that I know that a lot of people suffer with, and I've taken the top remedies for those, so anywhere between 4 or 5 to some have more than that because they're a bigger area, and given you like the top symptoms for that remedy that fit that symptom, basically. So hopefully, if you were like, oh, I'm pregnant and I've got really bad headache, for example, headaches, or I'm suffering from hemorrhoids, which are horrible and awful in pregnancy, horrible at any time, then you can open up this book and you can look and you can see what are the top symptoms, what are the top remedies that match my symptoms. I also always suggest that even though I've gone through and I've picked out what I see as the most what we call keynote symptoms, so the symptoms that really that remedy encompasses, it's always a good idea to go a little bit further if you have access to an online Materia Medica, or more access to further notes as well, just to read around that whole remedy. Like we said, you might go, oh, it's useful for that too. Oh, it's useful for that too, if you can do that as well. But really, hopefully, this book sits on its own and should be able to help women through their pregnancy be a bit healthier, really. So that's the plan.
Perfect. And we'll put a link to your website as well, because obviously if people would like to be supported through their pregnancy, you are the person for them to contact.
Yes, I'd love to hear from anybody. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everybody for coming along and listening today. Thank you, Charlie. That was so brilliant today to talk to you about pregnancy and how homeopathy can be so useful. Next week, we are going to have a Christmas special, so please do join us. We're going to have some fun things to talk about with homeopathy. I look forward to seeing you there.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and look forward to listening to our next one. Please don't forget to follow our podcast on your chosen channel, and please do leave us a review so we can continue to share homeopathy with as many people as possible. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to us on any of our social platforms mentioned in the show notes. We at Homeopathy 24/7 hope to empower you on your natural health journey.